Hello everybody, welcome back to another installment of how to build a neck through bass. This is part 28. There are many parts to this video series. 28 today. For this installment we're going to put on the tuners and we're going to get strings on this bass and get it settling into string tension. And I'll show you my process for that. Just to show you where things are kind of left off, we have the batteries in here, tape holding them in, everything's wired up, bridge is on, pickups are in. We just made the string nut. The reason I do the nut before I put tuners on is because I have those files going over the headstock. Since I carved the nut on the instrument, I certainly don't want to put scratches in those nice Hipshot tuners. Speaking of, let's get those out. Hipshot ultralight tuners. I use the Y key for my ensemble model here. For my, I've got other models where I use the mini clovers. Get 5 of those out. Each one comes individually wrapped. There's a little screw inside that individual pouch, and then we'll take the actual tuner part out. I'll just set it here. I'm always really careful not to scratch the tuners with things like scissors or an X-Acto knife when you're cutting open the packages. Because they're not cheap. You know, I'm not using the cheap stuff. Get all these little screws situated and put in a little pile where I can find them easily. I have this black pad on my bench and these are black screws, so I want to get them in a spot where I can see them in the light. Alright. I'll go ahead and just undo these. Pretty simple. In they go. I'm going to tighten this down finger tight, and then from there, just by hand, tighten it with that little guy. These aren't very tight at this point. The reason for that is I'm going to move them around a little bit once I find their perfect orientation, angle. I have a certain way I like things to look on an instrument, and I want to be able to move these tuners around before they're so tightly attached to the headstock they put scratches in when you try and move them. I don't want that to happen. With these Hipshot ultralight tuners, the little washer, I think it's made of nylon or something, it has a bevel to it, and I have to be sure to check each one and be sure the bevel's going down and not on upside down. I've done that on accident in the past. It doesn't make the tuner not work per se, but it just looks bad. So, you know, visual inspection of every component as you go is a must. Goto Resolite has the same kind of a deal. The washer has a bevel to it, and sometimes they get shipped to you put on the tuner upside down. So at that point you become the QC department of the world and you have to check it. Alright, I'm going to look at this from the front. I'm going to angle these where I like them. We'll get it the other way. That's where I want them, right there. I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes for these screws. My drill bit is marked with tape. The last thing I want to do is drill through the headstock. That's a no-no. Using the lowest torque setting possible on the drill, you can install these. Now just kind of sneak up on it and back off. As soon as I hear it hit, bottoming out on torque, that's when I leave the trigger. Done. I'm going to go back and tighten these by hand. That. Follow it by hand. Just be sure that each screw has a good hold, that it's really, getting a good bite and a strong hole in the tuner. That's what it's there to do, is hold it in place. Eric, so for this video series, I'm normally not answering questions, but this is a really good question. You're looking at it. You're looking at my entry level. My 4-string Pro Player model starts at $1850. That's passive. My 5-string starts at $1995. If you're looking at something like this, which is active, you're looking at $2445. And then I've got a full custom line. 4-strings start at about $3,000 and go on up. So that's about as low as I can price them and still make them here in the shop by hand from scratch. Okay, so back to this. And by the way, guys, if you have questions about just general pricing inquiries, whatever you want to place an order, send me a private message. Shoot me an email at bradymuck, B-R-A-D-Y, M-U-C-K, at yahoo.com. That's my email address. Or private message me here. Either way, I'm easy to get a hold of. Now we're just going to cinch these down very carefully. All right. Those tuners are on there. Now it's time to deal with the bridge. I'm going to do some preparation on the bridge. I'm basically going to give it a rough setting for the intonation. We know this bass is 34 inches in scale length. I'm going to measure that. And the G is pretty much spot on. I plan ahead for that. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a general intonation pattern in the saddles based upon the understanding that the G is pretty much right at 34-inch scale. If you do this enough times, you'll understand what that pattern is and about how far back each string should go as you graduate down the gauges. And this just gets it close, right? Since we're going to put string tension, we're going to stretch those strings. It's better to put something that's way closer to the final setup as far as the beginning and ending point of the string that's usable, where those break angles are, versus something that's extremely different, you know, millimeters or even an inch different. Then you have a kink in a string that's put in the wrong place, and that's no good. Okay, it's time for strings. Alright, these are my strings of choice. This is what I use on all my basses unless otherwise requested by the client. These are the Kurt Mangan nickel round wounds, 125, 100, 80, 60, 40. These are nickel round wounds. When I'm stringing a bass and it's coming time to clip this string, there seems to be some confusion about how far past the tuner you should go and how much slack you should have that you end up wrapping around the tuning post. So let me just measure. I want to give this to you. So on the low B string, I go about 5 inches. Depending on the kind of string and the size of the tuner post, your mileage may vary. You might have to use less, you may have to use more. But with these strings and these tuners, that gives me an adequate amount to wrap down the post and have plenty there without it being bunched up towards the very base end of it. No tension, just I mean, like finger tight, very, very loose. We're just getting the strings on here first. We're not going to put tension on the neck just yet. Got to keep in mind the saddles are still bottomed out on the bridge. I make a point to put a good bend and break in the string. What that does is causes a 90-degree angle in it. Now these have a hex core, so they're really good about not slipping. Sorry about that. Hex core strings, the core doesn't slip. If it was a round core, that's where they recommend that you put a kink or a 90-degree angle in the string before you flip it. That's pretty common with DR, like Sunbeams. That's one of the brands I used to use just as a player. And yeah. But with the Kurt Mangan strings, no need. That is 60, that's 40. Alright, now we're going to plan ahead for a little bit of string tension, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of tension on the truss rod, just to counteract what will be coming at it. So, put a little tension. I still can't hear the notes because the strings are sitting on the fingerboard. We're going to go ahead and raise these saddles up a little bit and give things clearance. Get it to where it's sitting clear of the fingerboard and the pickups. That way I can hear the notes and then tune it. Going to make a few adjustments now. As I inspect it, as I can feel that the pickups are very close to the strings. I'm going to go ahead and back those down a good bit, just so that we're not running into each other, strings to pickups. That can be a terrible sound, especially if you have pickups with exposed pole pieces. I can't think of a much more horrible sound you can make on a bass than clanking those strings on those pole pieces. Alright. Sighting down the neck, I can see there's just the slightest amount of relief. I'm going to go ahead and give it one more little turn on the rod here, just a quarter turn. And we're nice and straight on the treble side. That's what I want. There is the slightest amount of relief in the bass side, which is what I put in there. Vinny, this is a pro player. All right, so we have string tension now. This is always fun. The next part is obviously plug this thing in. This is where we get to hear the first notes of this bass. Now, I never expect perfection with these first few notes because I just put string tension on this thing a couple minutes ago. I don't expect perfection. I just want to be sure that it works and everything is right with the electronics. All right. Excellent, excellent. At this point, I'm going to let that bass settle into string tension for the next few days. After a few days have gone by, I'll obviously each day look at it, babysit it, play a little bit, be sure things are still working as they should. For the next part, part 29, we're going to, well, I actually kind of did it already, the rough setup. So really looking ahead to part 30, this is where I dial in the bass in order to test the fretwork. That's where I have some exacting measurements that I use to set the string height, and I'll test play every single note, every fret of every string, and check for high spots or low spots anywhere in the fretwork. And after that, it's doing the fret dress, polish things up, and finish out the instrument from there. So there's going to be a total of 35 parts to this video series. Today, right now, we're on part 28, so we're getting pretty close to the end here. It's pretty exciting. If you haven't seen all of the videos that led up to this one, go back, search how to build a neck through bass, part 1. You can search that on my timeline, scroll way down, you'll find them. They're just basically in backwards order. The further you scroll down, the more you'll see. Or you can go to the search bar and search that way. But yeah, if you're interested in building, I hope this is a great resource for you, and maybe it'll give you some ideas, some inspiration, or maybe some ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of before that you'd like to try. All right, thanks for watching. I will see you on the next one.